Hello, everybody, and welcome to the New Normal Reset for Young Lawyers webinar. Thank you so much for attending. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, is where the land that I'm coming to you from today. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders of this land, the elders past, present, and emerging. Well, the normal reset for young lawyers is um, about how COVID-19 has fundamentally changed how and where the legal profession practices. It's about navigating work from home and hybrid working environments. And it's about how we can create a culture of success in working from home and in hybrid models of working. Well, this evening, I'm very pleased that we have a panel of esteemed industry and academic experts. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Malika Chandrasegaran, partner of Herbert Smith Freehills. Malika is a partner at the Sydney office of Herbert Smith Freehills. She has broad corporate law practice experience with a focus on public and private mergers and acquisitions. Malika is an HSF lifer, having started at the firm as a summer clerk and then graduate. Malika manages a team of wonderful lawyers and is passionate about people. I'd also like to welcome to the stage Professor Pamela Hanrahan, a UniSearch expert from the Faculty of Business at the University of New South Wales. Dr. Pamela Hanrahan is a lawyer, legal academic and author specializing in corporate law, corporate governance and financial regulation. She is Professor of Commercial Law and Regulation at UNSW and a Senior Fellow of the Melbourne Law School. Pamela is a member of the Executive Board of the Business Law section of the Law Council of Australia and a member of the National Corporate Governance Committee of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and a member of the Connexus Institute Advisory Board and a non-executive director of Landcom. And she is a practicing solicitor, member of the Law Society. I'd now like to also welcome to the stage Dr. Alice Orchiston, who is Dr. Alice is a lecturer in employment law at the UNSW Faculty of Law and Justice. Her research focuses on labour regulation and workplace rights, including the exploitation of vulnerable workers. And you might know that I'm the president of Young Lawyers and also principal of No More Legal Service. I'd now just like to also just mention a thank you. This presentation, this webinar this evening is being co-hosted with and supported by UniSearch, which is Australia's leading and most established provider of expert opinion services. Well, let's get into the discussion. And I should remind people as we start the discussion with the panel, our esteemed panel, that you can ask questions in the Q&A chat down the bottom of the screen. There is a live Q&A. And in addition, you can also tick, I believe, anonymous. So you can ask anonymous questions. And if you want to ask a curly question of our panel, about supervision, about working at home where maybe it doesn't work out quite right, and what can you do to fix it, or what might be useful tips and tricks, you can definitely ask an anonymous question if you'd like to. Well, let's get into it. The first question is to Dr. Alice. How do the changes to workplace norms during and after COVID affect workplace rights? And do early career lawyers have any new workplace rights in this work from home world, or have existing rights changed, for instance?
Thanks, Simon. Well, I think we can start off by saying that we've seen increased demand for flexibility. I mean, we've obviously seen that we now have this new normal where a lot of people have been working from home. In fact, under the public health order that finished in December last year, that was what everyone was to do, unless it was not practicable for them to do that. So we now have that established, and there's increased demand for flexibility. But in terms of workplace rights actually changing, well, there's a few things. So a lot of workplaces have already introduced new flexibility policies which allow employees greater scope to work from home. Some are in the process of doing that. And for those that haven't yet got there, so perhaps they've gone back to what they had pre-pandemic, for those employees in those workplaces, they still have the opportunity to negotiate flexibility. So even if there isn't a statutory right which now gives them that opportunity, because we still have in the Fair Work Act, there were rights to request flexibility for certain employees. This is prior to the pandemic. Those may or may not apply to someone's particular circumstances. So for example, if you don't have a school-aged child or younger, if you're not 55 years and older, if you're not someone with a disability, you can still request flexibility, but that will be something that you negotiate individually with your employer. And I think what we've been seeing from most employers is that they've seen how this can work and this can be very successful, and they are generally adopting more flexible work practices. So whilst we haven't yet seen a statutory shift in terms of the Fair Work changing, giving everybody this statutory right to request flexibility, it's happening on a workplace by workplace basis, and it's really becoming quite an established norm now in most workplaces.
Thank you, Dr. Orchiston. So I guess I'll direct the next question to Malika Chandrasegaran. There are new ways of working. Some firms are providing a large amount of flexibility and choice. Others decide, for instance, a maximum of 1 day a week work from home is appropriate. So this could mean that team members are working in a hybrid manner pretty much every day, with some staff in their team in the office and some not. So some firms might be working full-time at home, in fact, those new law firms that are out there. What is appropriate, and what do you think best options are there? What should be considered when a team works from home, and what should we be learning to improve that experience?
Thanks, Simon, and hi, everyone. Look, I think there's really no one size fits all. As you can imagine, I think that we've all been trying different approaches, and as you've said, when Dr. Orchiston said, there's just lots of models that we're seeing that different people are implementing. And I think where this will head is, there'll be a little bit of trial and error in terms of what works really well. So for example, my firm, oh, sorry.
Okay. Bit of echo. Hopefully it's all good now for you.
Fabulous. So, for example, at our firm, we've launched an Agile 60 policy. What that is, it's really just a benchmark for our people to say that on average, you'll spend about 60% of your time in the office. And this is our sort of post-pandemic policy going forward. And the idea of the policy is not to be rigid, it's to be flexible. So, it really is an average of 60%, but that will vary from person to person. It'll vary depending on what works for the teams they're in, what works for their clients. And the idea is to be able to build something that works, within that sort of broad framework. And, what we're seeing, so for example, in my own team, we've decided, as a team, we'll come in every Tuesday and Thursday. So we're all in and we get to have sort of that team bonding and be able to bounce off each other and, all the other benefits that come with being together. And generally the people will, pick another day, but that's sort of the general approach, but it might vary from week to week. For example, if we've got a, transaction on, it's better that everyone's together, or if we've got client meetings, you might come in a bit more. Equally, there might be weeks where, it might mean we work at home a little bit more. So I think it's about being flexible and being able to adapt to changing circumstances. If we think about what are the key considerations from working from home, I think it's really striking that balance between the benefits of home working and the benefits of being in the office. I mean, we know that many of our people, for example, have valued that flexibility of working from home in the time for their families, health, well-being. There's a lot of great benefits from being able to work from home, cut down on travel time, be able to do a little bit of life admin through the course of a day in between, various things. There's a lot of benefits, and having the dog in your office, that's really fabulous. But equally, the office will remain an important place for collaboration, for learning, collaborating with clients, collaborating with each other, and particularly for our younger lawyers, for learning, learning by osmosis and learning by overhearing conversations or stepping in on discussions. So I think in terms of what should we be learning in this environment, or where does this go? I think communication is key, and constant communication about, is this working? What could be better? What's not working well? I think celebrating success stories, when things are working well, celebrating that and sharing some of those stories and learnings with each other. We certainly do that, between teams, and, what do you guys do? What's working well? What's not worked so well? I think listening at all levels of the organisation, being open to hearing about what people think about that, and then changing what's not working, and being open to that sort of through the course of developing a model for working.
Absolutely, and that's really interesting that there's actually a policy in place to have 60% of the time in the office and sort of 40 at home, and the flexibility that that means. So when you do have a really important deadline that is happening, is the team good at managing that and all coming into the office being sort of all hands on deck, but then, as you were saying, that the following week flexing the other way?
Yeah, and it depends on what types of things there's. Sometimes it could be a project where actually we all just want to be together because it's urgent, needs to get done. We want to bounce off each other, and there's a vibe that goes along with that as well, which can be really great. And the team is fabulous at going, oh, actually, and people want to be in. They want to be in and sort of being part of all of that. But equally, there'll be times that there's lots of work that can be done very effectively at home and through use of, electronic communication measures. So I think it is about that flexibility. And we do, like, for example, I guess I've seen weeks where people are in, 4 days, people sometimes then in 2 days the next week. Like, it just sort of depends on what's happening. But on average, we're generally in 3 days a week.
Thank you. And Dr. Orchiston, did you want to add anything to this idea that there can be choice and flexibility in the workplace environment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the model that Malia has discussed is a really, really good one. So the hybrid model, because the risk is if you don't have the hybrid model where you have people who are working from home maybe 5 days a week, they do have the risk that they can become quite disconnected from the workplace, and they miss those informal learning opportunities, those conversations with colleagues, the opportunities for peer support, and even team bonding, which just isn't replicated in the digital environment where you have to actually set up meetings with people. You can't just have those informal chats in the same way that you do when you have FaceTime with people. So I think it's really important in designing this model of hybrid working to consider how you can ensure that you still have all the benefits of people being in the office when they are working partly from home. So one of the other things which we have to do when we're doing this is to ensure that we ourselves don't allow work to seep even more into our home lives, because that can pose a psychosocial risk for employees, and it can affect employee well-being where they feel that there's no longer this division between work and home, which can be an issue for most professionals, certainly for academics as well as for young lawyers. It's about how you have those boundaries, and when you're working from home rather than being in the office, it can be all the more difficult to maintain that. So you can have home bleeding into work and work bleeding into the home, and that for a lot of people is actually negative psychologically. So that's one thing to consider. But the evidence about hybrid models of work so far suggests that it's been really positive for most people. So as long as you can come up with a model in your workplace which enables the same productivity and efficiency. Sometimes it's increased productivity and efficiency. People have been saving time on things like commuting, and that's been really beneficial for their productivity. But it's got to be the right balance for both employer and employee. And when you're working in a team environment, it needs to be something that works for the team. So things like having days where everyone is in the office at the same time is really important for that sort of cohesion, team bonding, and informal learning. So I guess it's coming up with a schedule, and as Malika has suggested, it's good to have something that's not too rigid, so you can actually flexibly schedule things so that people can be there when they need to be working together.
Thank you. And those chats that you mentioned in the office, they can be so important for early career lawyers or students who maybe they're paralegals or graduates. But they're some of the ways that supervision happens in an informal sense, where they get feedback, not in like an annual performance review type way, but feedback in those informal chats. I guess the other part of it is it might be harder to feel supported, or the younger lawyers might feel invisible or unseen or unheard in the work that they're delivering while they're working from home. And I guess I wondered if the panelists today have any thoughts about how partners and firm leaders and team members can support early career lawyers and ultimately reduce the sense of disconnection that might happen when we're working from home.
I'm happy to kick off and start this discussion. So I think, Simon, you've put it really well in terms of that kind of informal supervision, but also, learning just through corridor chats and that sort of thing. When we had started at the start of the pandemic, when we were all work from home completely, we really had to think hard around how do we try to replicate some of those types of, arrangements, and how do we overcome some of those challenges that you mentioned in terms of, people feeling a little bit invisible or unheard, or just not feeling like they can ask questions as easily. We started sort of saying that, look, Teams chat's like the new open door policy. Feel free to message on Teams chat, because it is just psychologically different to writing an email to ask a question or whatever else. It just feels more informal in the way that you could just walk by someone's office or desk and just ask them a question. So, we started to use the chat function in Teams. It was Skype when we first started, now Teams, quite a lot to have that. And then we set up, like a team group chat as well for the same reason, to be able to kind of informally connect in that way. In terms of that feeling of disconnection, again, I feel like we learnt lessons along the way of trying to come up with ways to increase that connection. And a lot of the things that we put in place last year, we've kind of kept now in this hybrid model. So even though we see each other in the office a lot more, we've still kept them. So some of the things that we did at the start of the pandemic, for example, were to have daily calls at the start of each day. They're 5-10 minutes, just to go around the grounds, check in what people are up to, from a work perspective as well. So to say, what are you up to? Just so we can balance out in case some people are feeling like they're not getting enough work or too much work, and so that people can hear from each other as to what everyone's up to, which I think promotes a sense of cohesion and understanding as to what's going on. And we always have this little, share a fun fact or anything else as well. And we've kept up those calls, and what I find is some people will dial in and some of us will be in the office, and it's sort of that hybrid, but we've kept those calls, and we have longer calls once a week, for example. One of our team members came up with a great idea of a virtual coffee where we do 2 truths and a lie, each person in the team takes a turn to do something like that. But, and it could be anything, but we do it regularly. It's in the diary and we do it every week, because it's that discipline of let's create opportunities for connection. We've got to be a little bit more deliberate about it, I suppose. We're back in the office, and I find that, we tend to do it on a day most people are in, but we still, 1 or 2 people will dial in. So we've had that hybrid approach again to something like that. Other tips, we've always had systems where we've got mentors for more junior team members, for example, not necessarily partners, but other people in the team. And I think it's about the discipline of checking in more formally. You know, previously you'd be able to just sort of step into the office or you check in, and I think it's that discipline of checking in. And funnily enough, you know, that kind of formal, regular checking in actually has worked quite well, because in some senses that means that people are actually getting more, you know, more of a formal type of support or more regular support than they might have otherwise. So I think that, you know, there's certainly challenges and ways to deal with it. I mean, one of the thing around staying visible, you know, I think that's a really good point, and each person will do it in different ways. So, for example, you know, I talked about daily calls. We get a different person to chair those calls, you know, each day, so that it's just not a burden on one person, and, you know, encourage people to send around emails. And I think it's appreciating that people are different and recognizing that they're different, but being very alive to that, so that, you know, people don't get left behind or feel unheard. And I think it's incumbent upon both leaders to appreciate that, but also young lawyers to sort of find ways to be heard and be seen. And I think it's important to support those ways. I've probably said enough.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And so, Professor Hanrahan, I wonder if you also have some thoughts on this issue of young lawyers might be feeling a little bit disconnected when working from home.
Yeah, thanks, Simon, and hello, everyone. Please call me Pamela. I'm hoping that people on the call will put questions for us in the live chat. You can do that. So, I'm sure you're allowed to put, I wish I worked at Herbert Smith Freehills, or if you could anonymously put, I work at Herbert Smith Freehills, and that there's no relationship to my experience. They're both fine things to comment on. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge that when you're at that early stage of your career, which a lot of people on this call are, you want to do a really good job for the firm and the clients, mostly 99% of the time. But it's also really important to think about how you're going to progress through your career. So you mustn't be shy about, that's why we put this question on the agenda, like, how do I make sure that people are seeing me? If I'm not a person who's naturally, you know, very boisterous and making TikTok videos and circulating them amongst the whole team, or, you know, if I'm more of a sort of introvert that likes to just, you know, do a piece of work and work on it for ages and then send it off when I think it's perfect, how do I make sure that people are noticing that? And I think what Malika said is absolutely right. You have to think about what feels authentic for you, and, you know, how are you present in the work that you do? And if you feel like it's not getting through, if you feel like other colleagues are more visible than you are, or you're not getting enough time and attention, you have to speak up for yourself, and that can be quite a hard conversation sometimes. But I think one of the benefits that we're seeing in the corporate world, and I suspect that it's coming through to the professions as well, is that because we have to be more deliberate in the way we work with other members in our teams, whether that's, you know, a supervising partner or a senior associate that you're working with, because you have to be more kind of conscious of the manner in which you interact with them, people are finding they're actually getting more feedback than they used to. So, you know, they used to go along and think they were doing fine and sometimes fall victim to that classic law firm strategy, which is just all of a sudden people stop giving you work, and then eventually you realise maybe it's an issue. Whereas now, because we do have to talk to each other, have to make time to engage with each other, I think some people are getting more feedback in real time than they used to, and so that's a really positive development if that's true. But you do have to negotiate the space for that to work for you, and I guess the message is you're entitled to that. You're entitled as a junior lawyer to be properly supervised, properly supported, feel like you're learning, feel like you're getting exposed to the different skills and different sort of, not just technical skills, but client relationship skills. They're all things that you're entitled to expect from your firm. And if you're not getting that, you need to strategize how you're going to have that discussion and you know, make that work. Because the last thing that we want is to come out of this process with a whole lot of people who are doing, you know, what I describe as piecework. We don't want you sitting in front of your screens, you know, just churning out billable units and not actually feeling like you're getting good learning opportunities and good opportunities to progress.
Yeah, thank you, Pamela. And it is very important to have those opportunities, especially for the people not making TikTok videos for their teams.
I'm not suggesting it. I don't think we're allowed to at the university. They're very mean.
Probably
They don't
not.
let us do any fun things like TikTok videos.
Oh dear, university.
Mhm.
But it is true, I guess, the underlying point that speaking up for yourself and negotiating that way with your supervisor of getting feedback in real time and getting the attention that you deserve, because you know, good supervision is something that is important, which is a good segue to I guess the next point, which is about supervision and how early career lawyers can ensure that, or can assist in making sure that they're being supervised properly. What are some good tips or protocols that you've seen or maybe you use to provide or you know, have good supervision of early career lawyers? What's been introduced in, for instance, Herbert Smith Freehills, or for the other panelists as well?
Simon, that's a really great question, and we've been sort of since we introduced our policy, we've had a series of online jams and feedback sessions where we try to get some feedback about, you know, how it's working and how people are feeling. One of our young lawyers said, and I actually wanted to just quote this because I thought it was a really great quote. They said, "It's not about where people are, it's about being looped, it's about the call, sharing screen, etc. It doesn't need to be in person, it just needs to be a personalised experience." And I think that's a really powerful message for us to all hear, because that's exactly it. That's all you want as a lawyer. You want to be, you know, a young lawyer, you want to learn, you want to be looped in, you want to have the opportunities to be looped in and grow. So I think that, you know, there's a lot of lessons in there for us. In terms of some tips of things we've tried to do over the course of this period, and I think, you know, can be helpful in a work from home environment. I think, you know, if we talk about informal training, that kind of Teams messaging, you know, that sort of more constant contact. So for example, if you give a piece of work, it's kind of like iterative feedback, you know, it's sort of not, here's a piece of work and 2 days later you get something and it might be completely not what you're looking for, and that's probably because you didn't give the right instructions and the, you know, the sort of feedback that you might give informally along the way. And I think it's being able to still do that in a hybrid world is really important. I think we use the share screen function quite a lot, actually. You know, so you have a phone call, it's sort of trying to replicate that you're next to each other at a desk and talking through a document and pointing to various bits. I think that can be quite a powerful tool to try and replicate that experience, so you are getting a bit more of that informal on-the-job learning. I think one area that's been challenging is we've got meetings with clients, client calls and whatever, and normally you sort of pull someone in, listen in on the call, so you learn from just listening in on calls. It's harder in a hybrid or a work from home model because it's very visible that there are lots of people sitting in on a call. And I think that we've tried to get better at talking to clients to say, look, I've asked these people to join or this person to join, not necessarily charging for their time, they're here to learn. And I think clients appreciate that and people appreciate that. And I think it's about having some of those conversations you might not have had to have in the past. And so those are just, some of the, I guess, learnings. And then equally on the more formal side, I think it's about shifting to formal learning that works in the hybrid model. One of the things I know that we've been doing or we've been working on is to redesign our L&D program to move to an online model. And it's not just about putting the same content that we would give in person just online. I think it's about reshaping the way in which we deliver that content. And I know we've been partnering with the Neuro Leadership Institute to just find ways in which, how do you engage people? And I think it's about spacing out different sessions, allowing people to reflect. It's about breakout rooms, so you can replicate that sort of small desk discussion type of learning. You know, Teams is quite amazing that it can just transfer you to a little breakout room and then transfer you back to a main group. But, you know, I think about finding ways in terms of formal learning where you don't just replicate content, you know, where you just talk for an hour about something, but finding ways to keep that interaction up. So yeah, I think there's plenty of ways, you know, and we keep learning and people have great ideas. And I think it's about bringing those ideas to the table as well, so we can all keep learning.
And in doing some of those things, like bringing younger lawyers in on client calls, or giving that iterative feedback like you would in person if you're in the office, I suppose. Does that then also, on the other side of things, give more confidence to the supervisor, so the partners or, you know, senior associates, that they are actually providing supervision that is effective? And then,
Yeah,
you know, that increase the confidence of the clients, I suppose, ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's about, you know, developing and learning that helps everyone. You know, obviously it's great for junior lawyers to develop and learn, but obviously it's also great in terms of work product and client, you know, what the client wants. So absolutely, it's, you know, it's great, and it means that overall the experience is better. So I think it's mutually beneficial to be able to do that. It's definitely not a one-way thing. You know, I much rather do that than sort of do nothing for 2 days and sort of sit back and get, you know, a piece of advice that hasn't had that iterative input.
Thank you, Malika. So the next question for the panel is about work health and safety laws, and do these still apply, or in what way do these apply when working from home? How does this apply in reality? People might be working a little bit later, and maybe the office doesn't know that they're working later when they're at home by themselves. Might throw to Dr. Orchiston.
Thanks, Simon. They absolutely still do apply when working from home. So workplace health and safety law doesn't end at the workplace if the workplace is predominantly based in the office. So wherever your workplace is, your work location, whether that's at home, on the road somewhere, in a cafe, or you're in your office, those laws still apply. So there's a duty to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health and safety of all workers, not just employees. So that encompasses two different things. So particularly what it raises in the context of the pandemic and people working from home, well, there really is both. So firstly, the physical aspect, which is whether people have the right kind of work set up, where they can perform their duties in a safe way, which isn't going to lead to injury. Some people have needed to tweak that because they didn't have a good setup at home, while employers are not required legally to provide office furniture and things like that. There is this legal obligation to ensure that people are working from a safe space. So good employers have actually checked in with employees about that to see what their physical work setup has been at home. And if people haven't had the right setup, talk to them about different ways that they could improve upon that. So that's the physical side. The mental side, though, is perhaps the more significant one when it comes to people working from home on a bigger basis than they previously were. And that can also be in relation to things like working longer hours and having this more blurring between the home life and the work life. So employers absolutely do have this duty where they need to protect against the psychosocial risks of working from home. And some of those risks, which we've already discussed this evening, have been things to do with isolation, employees feeling disconnected, lacking in the same mentoring and supervision opportunities that they do when they're working from the office, and feeling disconnected from team members and cut off on those supportive structures, because we know that working within an office environment, you actually have a range of supports which are harder to access when you're working from home, unless those things are being replicated on a remote work basis. So the important thing for employers to do with employees working from home, so Malik has suggested some wonderful things that a good employer can do to check in with employees to ensure that people don't become isolated and feel disconnected from their team, and try and replicate as much as possible those opportunities that people have for informal mentoring, informal team building activities with colleagues, and the supportive structures that they have within the office when they're working from home. So employers who don't respond adequately to that risk their employees developing stress-related injuries, which can get down the path of workers' compensation claims. It can obviously affect people's performance and productivity. So it's really, really important, obviously, for employees to retain a good sense of well-being about their work and feel happy, but also in terms of productivity and performance from the employer side, that this is something that needs to be managed. And so careful strategies to ensure that working from home or having a hybrid model is a good experience for employees and people don't start to feel cut off and isolated is really essential.
Thank you very much. And at this point, I'll just remind the audience, we welcome your questions. You can put questions in the live Q&A. There should be a live Q&A button at the bottom of the screen or on the side of the screen. And we welcome your questions on all things work from home. It is the new normal, and we have a wonderful panel here, so please feel free to ask questions. The well-being aspect, the psychological aspect in work health and safety that Dr. Orchison mentioned is really crucial, and a number of employers might be connected with employee assistance programs. But in addition to that, the Law Society of New South Wales has a SOS, or a solicitor outreach service program, which can provide solicitors, so if they have a New South Wales practicing certificate, confidential psychological support, and there are up to 3 psychological sessions per financial year paid for by the Law Society of New South Wales. So that's a 24/7 counselling service with a psychologist, including if someone is in crisis or distress, but not necessarily that, but 24/7 hour service can do that. Of course, there is always 000 if anyone's life is in danger, and that's an important thing to note. But the solicitor outreach service is 1-800-592-296, 1-800-592-296 for solicitors with a New South Wales practicing certificate. So the next question is about how can early career lawyers supercharge their career while working from home or in a hybrid model of work? What strategies are there to succeed? I might throw to Pamela.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks for mentioning the SOS. Because it's all lawyers on the call, we can all be honest with each other. Lawyers are often very intelligent people, tend to be a bit type A sometimes, and we don't have great mental health outcomes compared with the broader community. We often have lots of complicated issues around substance abuse and all sorts of things. That's just a fact of our profession. And so I think it's better to acknowledge if you're feeling that things have gone off the rails over the last 18 months for whatever reason. It's really important to reach out and use these services. That's what they're there for. It's completely anonymous, nobody will ever know that you've used it. The Law Society pays for 3 sessions with a qualified person who can be enough to kind of point you in the right direction if you need other help. So if you need help, make sure you ask for it, and you'd be amazed to know how many senior members of the profession have said to me, I actually needed that because so much of my identity was tied up with running around Macquarie Street in a suit, and when someone took that away from me, I didn't know what to do, and I really was struggling having my children at home when I was trying to work, all of those things. So, make sure that you use the services that are available if you need them, because that's the best thing that you can possibly do. All right, so that's if it's not going as well as you hoped. But for some people, it's been a fantastic time. It's been a time of enormous change for me and Alice as academics. We've obviously had to change a lot of the way we do our work, and we've got to think about our students as well as our colleagues that we look after. So I've been reflecting, because I knew Simon was going to ask me this question, on the things that I think have been beneficial. So my number one is, and we should have a poll at the end of the call, having the dog at work is definitely been my number one. And the other day I had to go into the office for a meeting and I was like, oh, I might miss the dog if I have to go to the office. So I just took him anyway, but don't tell the Vice-Chancellor that. The other things that I think have been really positive, I've found that I'm much closer to the profession as a whole because I work in Kensington. That's where my job is, at the University of New South Wales. And so often there'd be events like this, or, you know, a committee meeting for something I'm on, and I'd think, oh, I can't go because, you know, I have to get in from Kensington and I've got a class at 2:15 and I can't. Whereas now, because we are doing a lot more of these things online, I find that I'm able to spend a lot more time with lawyers in other firms and in other branches of the profession than I used to. So, of course, Simon mentioned I'm on the executive board of the business law section of the Law Council, and there's a couple of people on this. Malika and I are both on the corporations committee of the Law Council. So my first suggestion would be, why not take this opportunity to join a committee of the Law Society or the Law Council or something else entirely, like a local theatre group or whatever you're interested in, because you used to be so busy that you didn't have time to go to the meetings. But now that there's no travel time, you know, give it a go. And I find that I learn so much from talking to people outside of my immediate workplace. So that's a really good opportunity that I think we didn't have in the past that people should grab. My second observation is that I've become really resentful of travel time. It's ridiculous. Like I just live in the inner west, so it's not, and I drive to work, which is even slacker. But the other day I was driving over to Kensington. I was like, oh, well, that's a half an hour out of my day that I'll never get back. So my second comment would be, make sure you use that travel time that you used to waste doing something interesting and fun. So there's another firm that has a policy, if you're working from home, that you're supposed to give yourself some commuting time. Has anybody heard about this? So you're supposed to, like, if you're like me and listen to Radio National all the time because I'm old, one of the firms says before you start work, you have to walk around the block, right, and get a coffee, come back to your desk, just to create that kind of emotional separation. And then at the end of the day, do the same thing. So get up, go out, walk around the block, come back, shut your computer before you go, leave your phone in the other room, right, and sort of log off. Because that bit of time that we used to have between being in the office and being in our family, that half an hour of listening to, you know, PM on the way home was actually really important. And I think Alice was talking about making sure that you do that, you know, keep that separation. So that's my second suggestion. It's like if you have picked up an extra hour or two in your week because you're not travelling to the office every day, make sure you use that for something which is not just making the partners richer. You know, do something with it. Find a friend. That's another good tip. So somebody that you were friends with at uni who works in a different firm, make sure you keep up those connections and you can do a project together. I have one of my best friends is a partner at a big law firm, and we write journal articles together. I know that makes it sound hopeless because imagine having that as a hobby, but we do it and it's friendly for us. And, you know, we argue over the answer and usually a bottle of wine at the end to celebrate when it's finished. So if you can find some time and a buddy to do an activity like that that you might not have had time to do in the past, that's another really good thing that you can do as well. So that's just a couple of suggestions of things that have worked for us. Can I say something, Simon, about supervision?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So I was reflecting on good and bad experiences that I had as a junior lawyer, and I had a partner that I did some work for, and he was a really, really good lawyer. And so I used to write these letters, and then I'd go into his office and I'd have to sit there, and he would have this red pencil, right? And he'd go through and he'd like cross out basically every single word in the letter. But while he was doing it, he had really long eyebrows, and he used to pull his eyebrows like this, and like with one hand pull his eyebrow and mark the page up. And I used to think, oh, I'm such a bad lawyer, he's going to have no eyebrows left by the time we finish. The point that the reason I tell that story is I learned a lot from him, because he didn't say, send me the letter, I'll mark it up and I'll send it back to you. Like, we would go through the letter together, and I could see the things that he was just, correcting for style, and he was a really good drafter, and so I learned a lot from the economy of, seeing what he crossed out. But it was also seeing the things that he really was tossing up, like he'd change something and then he'd change his mind, so I'd cross that out. And you could see where the hard issues were that maybe you hadn't quite appreciated, had the nuance in it that, you thought it was more straightforward than it really was. But watching him go backwards and forwards on a particular construction or a particular issue in an advice was really helpful. So if you can get, I think what Freehills are doing, marking documents up on a shared screen, don't just give work to somebody and then get it back with it all changed, and, get them to show you why they're changing it. That's important too, I think. Thanks, Simon.
Well, no, thank you, Pamela. I think that's a really important point. Is it's that understanding the thought process that goes into the review of a document, and using that shared screen is a really good way of doing it. And actually, not just track changes and send it back with the comments on the side, but actually remotely sit together and edit together. It's a great way of doing it. Well, we do have some questions from the audience, and while we're going to talk about those questions, and please add some more questions, while we do it, we've also got a live poll, and should be a live poll button somewhere on your screen. The question is, how have you embraced disruption? How do you embrace disruption in the way that we're all working? You can add in your answer there. So in terms of the Q&A, so we've got a couple of questions, and the panel, you're all welcome to answer. We've got one question: what are your top working from home etiquette tips? Ooh, the etiquette. That's an important one. Please unmute. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Yep.
I think it's fine to have the dog on a conference call.
Yep. I think it's probably a positive, actually.
Or a baby, if you know.
Yeah. Anything that's cute like that. Very, very good positives. Another question.
I think this kind of blends into, the other question, which was about dressing in casual clothing. And I think that really depends on what you're doing that day and who's going to see you. I think it's really important to be comfortable when you're working from home, because that's how you're going to be the most productive. And if no one's going to see you, then you should actually feel comfortable to wear casual clothing. However, if you are on a meeting, you've got your video on and you're not dressed in a semi-formal attire, depending on the culture in your workplace, that may not be acceptable. So I think the answer to that one is it's going to depend on managerial guidance. There's a lot of variety in the legal sector. So some firms have a very casual approach, a casual dress approach, and obviously in other contexts it might be more formal. So I think that's something where you should seek guidance from managers, but also to just see what other people are doing, talk to your peers, but they're on the side of being more formal, I think then you'll be safe. But that doesn't mean wear a three-piece suit for every Zoom call.
That's right, but just a little bit more formal. At least on the top half, you know, and if you don't get
But
up,
wear
then
something on the bottom half.
yeah,
Don't
definitely
be
always.
being caught out in their boxer shorts or something else, where they just didn't bother dressing down below.
Can be dangerous. You've got to be prepared. Next question is: there's some great anonymous services, but do you think there is a good way to communicate how I'm feeling with my colleagues while I'm still being supervised?
I think that's actually a really great and really important question, because I mean, I do think it's very important to communicate if you're not feeling well or you're not feeling great, or, you know, and they communicate that to your supervisor, and as a supervisor to really hear that, because I think that you want to sort of hit those issues early before they develop, or, you know, if you ignore them, they develop into something a lot worse. And sometimes we just need a little bit of time out or a different type of support. You know, if you're feeling isolated, you might just, you know, with a couple of little tweaks can actually change that experience, and, you know, the partner or supervisor you're working with may not have picked it up. And I think being able to communicate that is really important, and as a supervisor, as I said, being really open and alive to that, and making changes so that people have a better experience. I think that's really important, and it can be very difficult. I know that as well. And sometimes, you know, it might be that you're comfortable speaking to a mid-level person or a different person or someone outside your immediate team, you know, not necessarily a service, but someone within your workplace. You might feel more comfortable, and I think, you know, then do that. But don't feel that you shouldn't, can't, or it's going to, you know, reflect badly, because a lot of us are facing a lot of problems. And, you know, I think, as Pamela said, you'd be surprised by just the number of people actually facing a lot of issues, and people who will actually really understand. And I know it takes a lot of courage to be able to speak up and do that, particularly in a work from home model, but it is really important. You know, there couldn't be anything more important almost.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really important. And from the Young Lawyers perspective, this year our charity of the year is Minds Count, the Wellbeing in the Law charity. Used to have a different name about the Trips and Jepson Memorial Foundation, but is now called Minds Count. And it's a really important charity, and it's really important for New South Wales young lawyers of the Law Society of New South Wales, because well-being in the law and mental health in the law is crucial. And the stats seem to be that across the profession, that the rates of various mental health issues are extremely high. So there are other people in your firm, in your centre, who have issues going on, and so definitely never the only one. One person's asked, how would you communicate with your colleagues if you feel like you're not being supervised that well when working from home?
Well, I guess this depends on, is this communicating with colleagues, so who might provide peer support to you, or is it communicating actually to the colleague who might be managing you or supervising you? Because I think it's two different approaches. Upwardly managing is an important skill to develop in the course of your career. So sometimes managers just can't see where they're lacking in a particular area, and it's about finding a diplomatic, careful way of raising that with your supervisor. So part of that, I guess, is developing a good rapport with your supervisor and feeling like there's a trusting relationship where you can actually raise a desire for some increased supervision. So it's about how you do that. But asking for increased supervision, if you can specify exactly what it is that you're seeking, that's a very reasonable thing. I mean, obviously time constraints come into supervision, so, you know, we need to be aware of managers' time as well. But it's something that's very reasonable to ask for, and maybe Malika can add something to this as well, but it certainly shouldn't be something that you feel that you can't do, because it's in everyone's best interest for you to have additional supervision if that's what you need to be able to perform as expected. So I think if you can be specific about what it is that you're seeking, and that's a reasonable request, then you should absolutely make that to your supervisor.
Yeah, you know, I completely agree with those comments, and I often say to the team, just ask for feedback. You know, sometimes people will forget, you know, I might forget, or a team member might forget in the moment to give that immediate feedback. I think, you know, say, so, you know, how did that go? Or if you didn't see it, go out to the client, ask and say, you know, did that go to the client? What did you change? Whatever else. And I think always ask, and never feel like you're, I guess, treading on anyone's toes or interrupting them. I think people can say, oh, can I just talk to you, you know, like maybe a little bit later or whatever else if the time is not perfect at that moment. But I think it's never, there's no harm in asking. And I think that that's really important. And, you know, as you say, I think getting tips from peers as well as to strategies that might work for them, you know, that can be really a good way to, you know, find new ideas. And of course, equally for partners, I think it's about being alive to that some of these issues can be a bit more exacerbated in this hybrid world, and being very alive to that and open to hearing feedback and asking for feedback as well about what's not working and how people are feeling.
Absolutely, thank you.
I think also it's good to spend a bit of time reflecting on what it is that you want, because if you go in and say, you know, I feel like I'm not getting enough opportunity to build my skills with clients, so may I, you know, sit in on a call, or if you've got a suggestion for the person as to how they can help you, I think most people are open to that. But if you just come in and say, oh, you know, I feel like I'm not getting enough supervision, you've got to be a bit more specific, I think, because often a busy senior person won't see their own shortcomings. So they'll think that they're supervising you really well. And so you do need to be a bit specific about thinking about, well, what let me suggest that we try this and see how that goes for a week and see if that's better. If you come in with a suggestion, I think it's always easier for the person to change what they do in response to that. The other suggestion that I might make in response to that question is you should be enjoying work, right? You should like it, not all the time. Everybody has bad days, but if you feel like your enjoyment of your work has gone down and you're not getting enough variety in the work, or then you need to think about that and think about whether you might need to change the sort of work that you're doing. Or nobody's supposed to be miserable at the office. So I think just a bit of self-reflection. If you're feeling a bit like, you know, I worked so hard to get here and now it's not what I was expecting, you got to think about, well, okay, well, what is it that I'm not enjoying about it? Because it might be that law is wonderful because a lot of different types of things. Some people really like, you know, helping clients to realise their business transaction or unravel their unhappy marriage or get compensation from their employer when they've been injured. Like, some people really like that aspect of it. Other people, like me, have a bit more of an engineering style brain. So we actually just like unpacking puzzles and getting complex things to. So you got to think about whether the type of work that you're doing suits your personality and what you're interested in. And so you can always think about saying, you know, can I do less of this and more of that?
Absolutely, thank you. And while you were talking about this, one of the participants has asked a question: what is the best way to raise and approach these issues? So I think that was about asking for maybe supervision in a better or a different way, without seeming like I'm complaining or not coping. And I guess that is an important part of it. But I think Pamela's point about coming with a suggestion shows, or can show, initiative and a positive approach to anything, I suppose, but in particular in this scenario, supervision. And if you do come with a reasonable idea, then that probably won't hopefully be seen like complaining or not coping. It will be seen as taking some initiative to build a more responsible supervision practice.
And I think that, a part of it is, what's important to remember is effective supervision is as much of benefit to a junior lawyer or a lawyer as it is to the person that's meant to be providing the supervision. It really is a two-way, it's a mutual benefit. And so I think that it's that mental shift of, I'm coming in and complaining because I'm not getting the thing that I want, but actually you're getting by coming in and suggesting, that, for example, can I get a bit of feedback on this piece of work, or can I get involved in something else? It's actually a mutual benefit. And I think if you think about it in that way, you'll feel less self-conscious about having to go in and say, can I have this or can I have that? And particularly when you go with the solutions, or, I'm keen to be more commercial on my next piece of advice. Have you got some feedback of, a couple of things that I could have done better on this? That sort of, here's the value proposition for everybody. And I'd really like to get some feedback. I think it's that sort of thinking about it in that way.
Thank you very much. So the last couple of questions are just, do you think it's okay for team members not to show their face in team meetings? Whew.
I think this one goes to etiquette. I think it goes into the topic about working from home etiquette. I mean, there's no sort of law about this, having to have your video on when you're on a Zoom call. So if your employer directs you, it's a lawful, reasonable command, and they want you to have a video on, then absolutely you need to do that. But if that's not stated, which it usually isn't, then the good etiquette is to have it on, unless you're in a really big meeting and you're not the one speaking, and then it slows everything down. But if you're in like a small team meeting, or you're just talking one-on-one with someone, unless there's a reason, rather than just not wanting to have it on, the good etiquette is certainly to have it on. And that actually is really important for people, because when someone new starts in the workplace, if they haven't actually met you face to face, and then their only contact with you might be via Zoom or Teams, seeing your face and actually having that face-to-face interaction, even though it's through the digital realm, is super important to them getting to know you, to feeling like they can identify you. It's sort of the who's who. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's good etiquette to have it on, unless there's something going on in the background that has to be censored.
Yeah, and what do our other panelists think?
I agree with Alice. I think we should have it on, and I'm very tempted, although I think we're taping this. I was going to stand up and show you what I'm wearing on the bottom.
I think we are recording.
I think you should have it on. I chair a lot of meetings, and I can tell you that it's wonderful because you've got the person's name next to their face. I think I'm going to make wearing a name tag in the physical office compulsory as well now too, because I find when I'm chairing meetings or I'm holding a class with my students who I may have just met, we've just started our new term, as Alice knows, last week. So I've got new students, I don't know them. And so I have the benefit of both their face and their name tag. And so I can ask them how they're going, or when they make a comment, I can acknowledge them by name and so on. So don't forget, it's not all bad. Like if you turn your camera on and the senior partner's got your face and your name there, they'll get to know you really much quicker than they might have if you'd just been in a physical meeting. So yeah, don't be shy would be my suggestion. I really struggle with my students don't like to have the camera on. I don't know, Alice, does this happen with you as well? And I have to, yeah, I have to really encourage them to do it. And it's funny because I think that they probably show their face all the time on their other technology, but
yeah, I agree with all of that. You know, I think it's really important to turn your camera on. If it's a meeting where people have got their cameras on, I think it's really important. It helps to be visible, I mean literally, but in sort of the more general sense as well. And the other thing, and the thing I've quite loved actually, is you get an insight into who people are. You see their backgrounds, you might see like a baby come in or a dog come in, you might just little things that happen that make us all very human and build that connection. It's been one of the nice things about Teams is you really do get an insight into people, and I think that that's so important for connection, and you get a lot out of it.
Absolutely. Now we have one other.
Can I add just one point on that? I actually have this feeling when I teach online, and I'm not teaching online at the moment, but I did last year, and students who never turn the camera on, you actually wonder, is this person even in the meeting? Because you might not see them ever, and it's like I called them ghosts. That was really just to try and provoke them into turning their cameras on. But you don't want to be the ghost. Don't be the ghost, because people will eventually notice that you never have your camera on, and they'll wonder, well, is this person off doing something else, or are they actually engaged and present in our discussion?
Yeah, and look, another comment that somebody made to me was, well, it's fine for all you partners, and because you've got like big, you can see I'm in my beautiful house and got my lovely bookcase behind me, and so we don't forget that some people are in a share house or they're in their bedroom because that's the only place that they can set up their desk, and so we don't forget that. But I think having your camera on is important enough to actually sort out your home workplace so there is somewhere that you can do it. So if you need to, hang a sheet over the weird paintings that you have hanging in your house like mine, so that you've got somewhere where you can actually have a business call with the camera turned on, it's worth doing that. And I know that there's one young person that I do work with, and I said after many calls on a committee, it's so echoey, and he said, yeah, I'm in the bathroom. Because he's got 2 young children, and he said it's the only place in the house where I can get the door shut. And so he was doing his, but he put like a picture on the wall behind it so it didn't look like he was in the bathroom. So I know it's hard, but I do think it's worth making the effort if you can set it up at home so there is somewhere that you can do it when you need to. I think it's worth it.
So it seems like the panel's saying keep the video on, don't be a ghost, but also I guess I just mentioned that you can put filters for the backgrounds on these days in Teams and Zoom and perhaps other platforms. Maybe don't do the cat filter, but any other filter that probably will work quite well for the backgrounds at least. The very last question, which might be slightly off topic, so we probably won't comment too much, is what are the courts doing to adapt to this new norm of working from home, and are they keeping up? I'm not sure if any of the panelists want to comment, or that might be a little bit outside of the scope of this today.
I'm happy to have a crack at that, not being a litigator, but having a few friends that have been caught up in it. I think they've done a terrific job, and I think the fact that when we went into lockdown in March, the whole profession had to make sure that we could continue to deal with matters quickly, like we needed to be able, not just commercial disputes and the sorts of things that I'm involved in, but, people get arrested and they need to be bailed. People have urgent applications where they're, in a risky situation or they've got disputes. And so we couldn't just say, well, the legal system is shutting down. We had to adjust really quickly. And I hope that a lot of the innovations, particularly in, court situations where you don't have a jury. I think that's, a separate issue. But for all other things, I think we've picked up a lot of efficiencies around the conduct of proceedings, and I hope that the courts will stick with that. And I think certainly the Chief Justice of the Federal Court is very keen to keep those changes where he can.
It's good to hear. Well, we have the results of our quick live poll, which was how do you think you can embrace disruption? 20% were saying using Zoom to record topical podcasts about the area of law that I specialize in. 20% were saying developing a digital strategy that boosts my firm or practice area's profile. And the winner of this was 60% using social media to build my profile and position me as an industry expert. And these days, I suppose LinkedIn is getting quite a good workout for people building their profile and using social media and connecting professionally with others in the profession and the sector. And so maybe that is one of the new ways, one of the resets of normal. Well, we're coming to the end of our presentation of the webinar today. One of the comments earlier was just about connecting and using the time you have to connect with your profession. And I can let you know that New South Wales Young Lawyers has 15 committees, every area of law that you could think of, whether it's animal law, environmental law, international law, business law, criminal or civil, family, human rights law. There are a number of committees that you can get involved in. Sorry, did you go,
also
Dr.
workplace law.
Yes, workplace and safety law. There is definitely a committee with people who are very interested in that area. And each of those committees runs events from time to time, but you can get involved in them by going to the Law Society of New South Wales website and logging into the website and clicking on the Young Lawyers tab and joining the committees that you are interested in. Well, thank you very much to our panelists today, Professor Pamela Hanrahan, Malika Chandrasegaran and Dr. Alice Orchiston. You've been a wonderful panel of experts giving a huge amount of tips and tricks to the participants and young lawyers today. And so I want to say a massive thank you to you and to UniSearch as well, our partner in this event, who have been wonderful in helping organize this event for everyone this evening. So thank you very much. Thank you to all the everyone who joined and participated and asked questions as well. Thank you to the New South Wales Young Lawyers and Law Society staff for your support of this event as well. And finally, have a great evening and make sure that you take on some tips and get yourself out there and with proper supervision and don't be too shy in making sure that you're engaged in the new normal. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you.